And he turned around and he told people, you know, if that person starts screaming in the crowd, I give you permission to beat them up, and don't worry, I'll pay your legal fees. Well, fortunately for a lot of people that they didn't do that, because Donald Trump would never pay you legal fees. And you could take that to the bank, because I'm right now in litigation with him on the exact same topic.
To borrow one of Donald Trump's old lines, Rudy, if you're listening, signs today that Rudy Giuliani is facing a real cash crunch as his legal troubles pile up. Politico is reporting that Giuliani has cut down on his personal entourage over the last few weeks, seeking to, quote, cut costs. This on the heels of the New York Times reporting that Giuliani's advisors believe Trump should pay his pricey legal bills. A fruitless request, if you ask Michael Cohen. The Times reporting this, quote, Mr. Giuliani led the effort to subvert the results of the 2020 race in a series of battleground states, but he was not paid for the work, according to people close to Giuliani and Trump. His supporters now want the Trump campaign to tap into the $250 million it raised in the weeks after the election to pay Giuliani and absorb costs he has incurred in the defamation suits. That's not to mention the federal investigation he's facing over his conduct in Ukraine. And as the pressure ramps up on Rudy, George Conway warns in a new op-ed today that could mean legal exposure for the former president. Quote, if Giuliani has anything to offer prosecutors to save himself, it would have to be Trump, the only bigger fish left. And it was arguably criminal for the then president to have used his official powers to try to coerce foreign officials into aiding his reelection campaign. In fact, Giuliani's admission that he wasn't conducting foreign policy, but merely helping Trump personally is exactly what would make the scheme prosecutable. The former guy just might want to rethink stiffing Giuliani on those bills. We're back with Tim O'Brien and Joyce Vance. Joyce, this feels muddled, frankly. I mean, if Trump starts just injecting cash into Rudy's bank account, right when Rudy is faced with a decision about whether or not to cooperate in an investigation that could lead to Donald Trump, does that expose Trump to obstruction or bribery charges potentially?
The whole situation is really fraught on both sides. Certainly, if Trump did that, there would be that suspicion based on how all of this is evolving with Rudy Giuliani's supporters saying that they've spoken with the president's legal team demanding these sort of payments. It could just be characterized as a payment on a debt that was owing, but Trump has maintained all along that he would pay Giuliani only for expenses and not for legal fees associated with his post-election work. So it would give off that sort of an odor. And it would certainly be interesting in the context that we're seeing now, where Giuliani has previously said that he's got some insurance, that if he were ever to be indicted, that he has material that he could turn over. I think George Conway nails it when he suggests that the former president would be the most likely person that Giuliani could convince federal prosecutors he should be permitted to cooperate against. And so Trump proceeds at his peril no matter what he does here, seemingly.
I want to read some more of the Conway op-ed that Joyce referenced, Tim. George Wright says, federal prosecutors in Manhattan tried to get permission last fall for a Giuliani raid, but were rebuffed by senior officials serving under Trump. Last June, for reasons still opaque, then Attorney General Barr ousted the U.S. attorney there and tried to handpick a successor. If any of that was intended to protect Giuliani or Trump himself, it might end up backfiring spectacularly. If a warrant had been executed before January 20th, it's hard to imagine that Trump wouldn't have pardoned Giuliani out of spite, self-interest, or both. And frankly, there was some reporting that it was on the table that he might have pardoned himself. Why do you think he didn't?
Well, I still think that's the million-dollar question. Donald Trump is motivated most of the time by his emotions and animus. He is not a strategic thinker. And I doubt any time this came before him about how to treat Giuliani, he was trying to watch this unspool into the future and wonder about how it might come back to haunt him. After all, his relationship with Rudy goes back decades. It was a mystery to those of us covering Rudy and Trump in New York in the 1980s when Rudy was the U.S. attorney for the Southern District, why he wasn't taking a closer look back then at allegations of possible money laundering and Trump's proximity to members of organized crime. in New York. It sort of skated under the radar. It was attributed back then to the fact that Rudy had his eyes on City Hall, and he knew that Trump would be an important ally if he wanted to do that one day. And since then, Rudy has essentially been a bagman and a sort of dirty ops operator for Trump. So he knows a lot. And it is in Trump's interest to keep Rudy on his side. But the issue of legal fees is interesting because Donald Trump doesn't even pay his own legal fees. So the idea that he would open up his wallet to pay someone else's is beyond the pale. And I think if he does it now, I don't think anyone should be under the impression that this is paying a legal fee. It is paying hush money. And that's what it amounts to. And I think if that becomes witness tampering, or if law enforcement officials see it as witness tampering, that's going to be problematic for Trump.